Don't forget to like and subscribe to Jolie Knots Crochet. Share with your friends. Hit that little notification bell so you can get notified when new patterns release. All our videos are available in left and right-handed tutorials.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Jolie Knots Crochet. I'm Crystal and today we are going to be making the Kyah shawl. Now this shawl is made with puff stitches, double crochets, and chains, and it's made to have the puffs be coming out from the center, just like so. You can use really any weight yarn on this project with the recommended hook size. It will work with all weights. I used for what we're making today a 3-weight yarn and a 5mm hook. This is a 4-row repeat, and once we finish our repeats we will get started on the border, and the border is mixed with puff scallops and treble crochet with picot scallops. And I think, of course, that everything really looks best and has the best drape if you steam block it or any sort of blocking. It just falls and sits really nicely. So I did steam block this one. It didn't make a huge difference other than allowing the border to drape a lot nicer and not just be like a fluff. All right, so the yarn that I am going to use, well, the yarn that I did use for this project is the Karen Skinny Cakes. These are in 8.8 ounce skeins, 250 grams, so 795 yards. And I used one full cake and then one like maybe 2/3 cake of this. So I used approximately 1,350 yards for an 84 inches across the top and 40 inches in length in the back. So you can make it whatever size you like, and I will show you exactly where to stop in the pattern to get that sized properly. If you prefer written patterns over video patterns, there is a written pattern link to my Ravelry below. Also, don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Jolie Knots Crochet. You can also join the Jolie Knots Crochet community group on Facebook and show us what you've created. Okay, so to get started on this, I am using a 5mm hook and what is left over of my second cake. So I am going to show you the setup rows. The setup rows are the first 4 rows, and then I'm going to show you the repeat, and then I'm going to show you the border. So the way that we are going to start first is to make a magic ring. Now, if you are not good at magic rings, the easiest way for me is to do a backward slip knot. So typically with a slip knot, you are pulling your working yarn through. But with a backward slip knot, in order to make a magic ring, we're actually pulling our tail end through. Okay, so once we work into that, when you pull your tail, that's what's going to allow it to get smaller, your ring. So go ahead and get your ring on, pull up a loop, and chain 2. That will not count as a stitch. Every row is going to start with the chain 2. That will not count as a stitch. Okay, so working into your ring, we're going to start with a puff V-stitch. We're going to have a lot of puff V-stitches here, so pay attention. You're going to yarn over, go into the ring, and pull up a loop. We're going to do that 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through all but the last loop, and then yarn over and pull through both. Chain 1 and 1 more puff. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through all but the last, yarn over, pull through the last 2. That is a puff V. Puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, okay? So this is one side. Now we're getting to our corner. So our corner is going to be a chain 2. And now we're going to start with another puff V. So 1, 2, 3, yarn over, pull through all, yarn over, pull through all but the last, and then yarn over and pull through 2. Chain 1, and our last puff, 1, 2, 3, yarn over, pull through all but the last loop, yarn over and pull through the last 2. And this is our row 1, and now you can pull your tail and it'll get nice and tight. Turn your work. We are turning our work after every row, and this is what your row 1 should look like. Row 2 is 2 chain 2. Now we're going to put 2 double crochets into the top of the first puff stitch. 1, 2. Now into our puff V stitch, we're going to add a puff V. So we will always have a puff V on top of a puff V. Just like that. So you have 2 double crochets and a puff V. Now into our chain 2 corner space, we're going to put 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. And that new chain 2 is now going to be our corner stitch. Or just our corner, I guess, technically. So this 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets goes into your chain 2 space between your puff of V's from row 1. And now this side is going to look exactly the same as this side. So we're going to put a puff V into our puff V stitch. One, 2, 3. And now we are going to end with 2 double crochets on top of the last puff. 1, 2. And this is the end of your second row. Now getting started on row 3, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. Remember, your chain 2 does not count as a stitch. We're going to put a V stitch in our first stitch. So a V stitch is just a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. Now we're going to double crochet into the next double crochet. And now we're up to our puff stitch, and we're going to puff stitch in there, a puff V. 2, 3, chain 1, 1, 2, 3. And that's what the beginning of your row 3 will look like. Okay, after your puff stitch, we're going to go ahead and double crochet into the top of each of the next 2 double crochets. And now when you get to your corner, you are going to chain 1, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, and then chain 1. So it should be a chain 1, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 1. And now we're going to work into these 2 double crochets, working a double crochet into each of those. 1, 2, and now we are back to our puff V stitch, where we will put a puff V stitch into that stitch. Now working up to our last 2 double crochets, we're going to place a double crochet into the next stitch, and then into the last stitch we're going to place a V-stitch just like we started. Remember, the first side mirrors the second side. They're going to be exactly the same. So here is what the end of your 3rd row should look like. Now getting started on row 4, we are going to chain 2 and turn our work. Remember, our chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. And now we're going to place 3 double crochets into our first stitch. 1, 2, 3. Chain 1, skip your chain space, and then place your 2 double crochets. 1, 2, and now we're up to our puff stitch, and we're going to go ahead and puff V-stitch in there again. And now we're up to our double crochets. So we're going to put a double crochet into each of the next 2 double crochets. Chain 1, skipping your chain space, and putting a double crochet into the last double crochet of your side. And from here into our corner chain 2 space, we're going to place 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. Now we're going to double crochet on top of our double crochet, the first double crochet of that side. Chain 1, skip your chain space, and we're going to double crochet on top of the next 2 double crochets. Puff V into your puff V stitch. Chain 1, your next puff, and now at the end we're going to go ahead and put 2 double crochets into our next 2 double crochets. So 1, 2, chain 1, skip your chain space, and now we're going to place 3 double crochets into the last stitch. Now this concludes our setup rows. These 4 rows are just to get you set up, and now we're going to do our repeat rows. Our repeat rows are going to be 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you have 4 repeat rows. So row 5, this is going to be the first row of your repeat. I'm going to go through 1 repeat with you, and then I'm going to show you the border. So row 5 is going to be chain 2 and turn your work. Now each repeat we're going to be adding a row of puff stitches. So essentially going all the way up and down the pattern. Everything's going to be really exactly the same on top of each other. The only difference is the corners and the edges. Let me see if I can get you a better photo this way. So for each repeat, we are adding an extra puff in the middle, and we're also adding an extra puff at the end. And then you'll just continue all the ones in the middle, and all the stitches are exactly the same sitting on top of each other. So if it's not, if you're not understanding it yet, don't worry, you'll get it most likely after your first repeat. Okay, so we have our chain 2, and now remember I told you we're adding a puff stitch at the end and we're adding a puff stitch in the middle. So we're going to puff V into the first stitch, and now we're going to follow our pattern. 2 double crochets, chain 1, skip your chain space, 2 double crochets. Now we're at our puff V, so we're going to put a puff V, and now we're going to continue following the pattern. 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Now if you've done this row correctly, you are going to have one last double crochet here at the corner. So we are going to skip that stitch. So our last stitch is going to be a puff V. Remember I said we were going to start and end with puff V's. So puff V, chain 2, that's your corner, and now puff V again. Now we're going to skip that first stitch right here, and then we're going to work the pattern going after that. So we're going to do our 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, always skipping our chain space, and then working a puff V into our puff V, working your 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. You should have 1 stitch left at the end, and we're going to add our last puff V. And here is what your row 5 should look like. You should have an extra set of puffs coming in on each side. And now we're going to get started on row 6. Row 6, we're going to do chain 2, turn your work, 2 double crochets into the first puff stitch. And now we're going to puff stitch into our puff. And here's where your repeat is. Your repeat is 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff V, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff V. So go ahead and finish that out, and I'm going to meet you back at the corner and then work the repeat with you going right back down. Okay, I've finished out my repeats, and now I'm up to my corner space. My corner space is going to be pretty simple: 2 double crochets, chain 2 and 2 double crochets. And now we're going to work our repeat going back down the row. So puff V, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff V, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. I will meet you back at the last puff V. After your last puff V of the row, we're just going to end with 2 double crochets, just like we started with. So 2 double crochets into the last puff. So the end of your row 6 should look like this. And if you are noticing now, all we're doing is adding those stitches in between our puffs, before our puff and after our puff, in order to create this whole middle part. And then we start again with puffs, okay? So getting started on row 7. Chain 2, turn your work, V-stitch in your first stitch, so double crochet, chain 1, double crochet into the next stitch, and now you have your repeat. Puff stitch, 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet. Repeat again, puff, 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet, and then puff, and I will meet you back at this corner. Okay, so I've made it to the corner. I have my puff and my 2 double crochets. Now the corner of row 7 is to chain 1, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, and chain 1. And now we're going to work the same exact stitches right on top of all of these stitches. So 2 double crochets, puff V, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff V, and again. And then in our last stitch here, I'll meet you back here, but we'll have a double crochet and then a V-stitch into the last double crochet. Okay, here's the end of row 7. I just have ended with my double crochet and then a V-stitch into the last stitch. Now beginning on row 8, which is the last row of our repeat, we're chaining 2, turning our work and placing 3 double crochets into the first stitch. Chain 1, skip that chain space, and 2 double crochets. So now we are continuing to do the same again, the same repeat on top of each of the stitches. So puff, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Go ahead and finish that out. I'll meet you back at the corner. Okay, here we are up to the corner. I have my 2 double crochets, chain 1, double crochet, and now it brings me to my chain 2 corner space. And into that corner space, we're going to do 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then 2 more double crochets. And now we can work our repeats going all the way down. Well, our repeat starts at the chain, but every stitch is exactly the same on top of it after our corner here. So it's going to be a double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets, puff V, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, then another repeat down. I will meet you here at the last stitch, and the last stitch is where we're doing our 3 double crochets into the last stitch. Okay, so after your last 2 double crochets and your chain 1, you'll have 1 stitch left, and that's where we're going to add 3 double crochets. And this is going to complete your rows 5 through 8 repeats. And what you're going to do, you're just going to grow that as large as you like. And then for your border, you're actually going to do 1 more row 5, and then we're going to get started on the border. So I'm going to go ahead and work 1 more row 5. So if you need to remember, this is where row 5 is, where you're starting with the puff stitch and you have a puff stitch in the corner. You can either rewind it and rewatch that, or if you know that the puff stitch goes into the first stitch and into the corner, just go ahead and work it. I'm going to work my row 5 again, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to do the border. Okay, so here is my row 5 is completed. I have my puff V-stitch at the end, the center corner, and the other end. So now to get started on the border, we are going to chain 2, turn our work in double crochet into that first stitch. Now, what we're going to do, it's going to be like a puff, well, it is a puff V, essentially just a little bit different. So it's going to look like this. We're going to have 4 puffs around. So into your puff V stitch, we are going to puff, chain 2. We're going to do that 3 times. Second time, chain 2. And third time, and chain 2. So you should have a puff stitch, chain 2, a puff stitch, chain 2, puff stitch, chain 2, and now we're going to put 1 more puff, but we're not going to chain 2 after it. So it should look like this so far. Now what we're going to do is single crochet into our chain space. So we're going to be switching off here. We will be having a scallop with picots and then a scallop with puffs. Scallop with picots, scallop, well, this is the corner, so that's a little bit different. But we're just going to be switching off, going down until we get to the corner. So working into straight after your single crochet, working into the next puff stitch, we are going to place a treble crochet, picot, which is chain 3, and then you slip stitch to the front 2 loops of your treble crochet you just made. Now treble crochet again, we're going to do that 7 times total. Picot, treble crochet, picot. Should have 7 treble crochets, each one having a picot at the top. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need 2 more. After you finish your 7th treble crochet, you're going to move right over to this chain space and we're going to single crochet. Oops. Okay, so after our scalloped treble crochets, we are going to do our scallop puff again. So straight from here, we're going to do a puff stitch, chain 2, remember that's going to be 3 times, the second one, the third one, and we're going to end with one more puff. So we should have 4 puff stitches separated by chain 2s. And now we're going to single crochet into the chain space. Now we're going to work a 7 treble crochet scallop right here, and then I'm going to show you how to work the corner. Okay, so here's how we're going to work our corner. Your last scallop and your last row of puffs should be a treble crochet. And then when we get into here, we're not going to do the puff one, we're actually going to do a treble crochet one. So into our puff V-stitch, we're going to put 4 treble crochets, all with a picot at the end. Alright, so I've got my 4, and now I'm going to put 4 into my corner space. Okay, now I have 4 in my corner space, and I'm going to put 4 more into my next puff V. And this is what your corner will look like after you've finished your 4th one of your puff V. So you should have 12 total. 4, 4, and then 4. And we're going to single crochet into this chain space. And now the next side is going to look like this side. So you're going to have your 7 treble crochets, then your puff, then your treble crochets, and your last one should be a puff stitch, ending with a double crochet into the last stitch. So I am going to work first my 7 treble crochet, then my puff, then my 7 treble crochet, and I will meet you at the end here just to show you exactly how we finish out that border. Alright, I have gotten to the end of my border, and the only thing different that we're going to do here is put a double crochet into the last puff stitch. And that's it. You are finished. You can cut your yarn. Everything is done. I did block mine, and the easiest way that I found was just to go straight into the middle. Treble crochets here for the blocking, and it gave a really nice look and drape after it was blocked. You don't have to block it, I just think it falls nicer and drapes a little bit better. All right, Thank you everybody for watching Jolie Knots Crochet. Again, I'm Crystal. You can find Jolie Knots Crochet on Facebook and Instagram under Jolie Knots Crochet, and I do have a Jolie Knots Crochet community group on Facebook, so you can join and show us what you've created. The written pattern will be linked below in the description box for the Kyah shawl.